As somebody who has spent well over 200 hours in the first Descendant since it was released a little over 2 weeks ago, and as somebody without any experience with looter shooters like Warframe, Destiny, or well obviously the first Descendant, it's safe to say that the first Descendant is incredibly addicting and I've been having a blast with it. But is it an actually good game? And does it hold up after you've actually scratched the surface? Let's dive into it. So starting off with the good. First off, we of course have the plot. There's a lot of really good plot in the first Descendant, and it really keeps you engaged with all of the different types of plot that you'll find all across the game.
Hey, these Vulgus punks are responding really quickly. Looks as if their commander isn't to be taken lightly.
I didn't hear a single word she said. As for how the game kind of flows, I would say that it's very well structured. I felt like when I was playing the story or playing through the missions, it's very well structured. I feel like the missions are very interesting, and most importantly, every time I finish a mission, it puts me right in front of the starting point for another one, so you kind of get stuck in this gameplay loop. And it's very easy to be playing through the story or whatever and just keep finding yourself starting yet another quest, and then thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, I'll just play another one while I'm here, or I start another one, let's play another one. Rinse and repeat, and you kind of feel like you get stuck in the game for quite a long time. I would say it's a bit of an ADHD trap if you are suffering from that. Maybe be a bit careful about the game, but it is very fun to say the least. And of course, eventually the game will lead you towards bosses that you might not be able to defeat. They might be too difficult, they might do too much damage, or you might not deal enough damage, or maybe the mission is just too hard. And that leads to the other pit or rabbit hole, which is that there's always something that you can upgrade. There's always that one module that you can apply to your weapon that gives it a little bit more damage. There's that one module you can apply to your character, or you can get a whole new character, or you can get a whole new weapon. There's always something that you can, again, upgrade so you can actually perform better in game and continue being stuck in this hamster wheel of a gameplay loop. There's always something to grind for, even in the late game where I'm at now, you know, over 200 hours down. There's still tons of things that I can upgrade and grind for because I want to be able to have the best equipment that the game can offer. And it all just comes together perfectly where you're either grinding a mission, or you're grinding for something to upgrade, or you're grinding for something completely new entirely, be it a new character, a Descendant, a new weapon, or even a new skin, which we will cover later. The story overall, ignoring the gameplay loop, is okay. I wouldn't say it's an Oscar winner by any means. I also wouldn't say it's a stinker. It's okay. It's passable. It's fun. I would want to give a special shout out to Eugen.
Get him with my arcade! Please don't shoot! I'm begging you!
I definitely felt for Eugen and his squad. That whole mission was well structured. And I would want to say that the voice actors, even though the English ones do feel a bit cringy at times, does feel like a cartoon at times.
I think the entire facility is spiraling out of control. The path I took looked like that too.
I do enjoy listening to them a decent amount. Maybe there's a little bit of a halo effect going on, that just because the characters will look good, you kind of look past it. But either way, I don't mind listening to them too much. Like, yes, it is ridiculous to hear some of the things they are saying and the way they are saying it, but it's fun. It's fun. And, you know, building off of that, there's tons of customization for the character, for the guns, and there's an incredible amount of depth to both. There's so many different stats. There's so much that goes into what modules, when you want to equip them. There's different attack types, there's elemental damage, there's all these different factors, your attack damage, your fire rate, your crit rate, crit damage, weak point damage, and just so many more things. There's even special mods that change how your weapon behaves entirely. There's just so many things you can customize in the game to make it behave the way that you want it to. I mean, as of right now, there's still no meta. Like, yeah, I see YouTubers uploading videos about builds they've found, and I'm still working on my own, but there still isn't really that one best meta or best build, and even the ones that people do claim to be the meta ones are not actually the best ones. There's always a better build or whatever right around the corner for somebody else to figure out. So overall, I really enjoyed it. But as for the gameplay loop itself, again, grappling around is super fun. I have a lot of fun with grapple. Apparently there's different mods that lets you level up the grapple even more. You can have long distance grapples, you can have more grapples, you can grapple the air. There's just a lot of different ways you can grapple around, and once you start getting used to it, it is pretty damn fun. It's fun to use the grapple to optimize how fast you can rotate or run around or just clear missions. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Shooting enemies, the same thing. Again, if we're just speaking pure gameplay loop, you're going to be shooting enemies a lot. There are some ability based characters, but overall it is a shooter at the end of the day, as a looter shooter, and you will find yourself shooting enemies quite a bunch. And that ties into the whole customization as well, because you can keep customizing the weapons to behave exactly how you want them to. This makes shooting enemies a bit more fun. Let's say I want to go for headshots, I build a weapon around hitting headshots, hitting weak points. Let's say I want to clear a lot of enemies with AoE damage, there's a weapon for that. There's just a lot of different ways that you can actually, yeah, fight your enemies and tackle your problems. And then of course there's the plot. Moving on, bosses or void interceptions, we should call them. I'm not a big fan of the dungeon bosses, but the void interception bosses are really fun. Also, they really nailed the boss entrance. Though it is a bit rough with the public matchmaking. So all the bosses have these weak points that you need to shoot, and there's a frenzy bar that basically when this fills, the boss goes into like a frenzy mode. You have to shoot a special weak point to actually get them out of frenzy mode, otherwise you can't kill them. There's a time limit how long you have to actually defeat them, and there's a whole depth where the weapons you're using and how you're using them and your elemental damage, because different bosses have different elemental weaknesses and strengths, all ties into each other. And once you start figuring it out, it starts getting really fun. But I'm really deep into the whole game and I still haven't figured it out fully, but I'm still having a blast just figuring it out and optimizing how well I can defeat the bosses. The level design looks absolutely beautiful. There's 9 different regions, and there's not counting the void interception arenas, though those are maybe not that special, but there's 9 different regions. They all look amazing, super beautiful, more or less pretty unique. In some cases the maps vary a lot depending on where you are in the maps as well. Every map is divided into sub maps or sub zones with their own look and feel, with some overlap, but generally speaking their own look and feel, and it just looks good. It looks good. It's visually stimulating playing this game, not only because of the map design, but thanks to the plot as well, of course. But as far as the game's own design goes as the gameplay loop, I do want to say that it's very complicated, it's very complex. There's a lot of different numbers. I'd say a lot of number crunching, a lot of things to figure out when you want to optimize your build, assuming you want to do it yourself. And this might be a bad thing for some, especially knowing how games are nowadays, what people do seem to be interested in. Personally, I actually enjoy it. I'm kind of tired of having super simple games and that being the only option for games nowadays. So I very much enjoy having somewhat of a more complicated or complex experience where you can try optimizing, where there's a lot of numbers to optimize and a lot of ways you can go about it. I also want to mention something else, which is the code breakers and the code analyzers. There's been this whole drama about the code breakers, code analyzers, which in short, for those who don't know much about them, it's an item that you need to find or pick up, and then you take this item to specific vaults that you can find all over the map, and it's a little bit of a mini game to find them. And once you find them, you have to use these code breakers to play another mini game, and if you succeed in this mini game, you get crafting materials, and these are a must-have for almost all of the things you want to craft in a game. And there's been a lot of complaints about these because they were pretty difficult and they didn't really drop that much, so it was a very big grind for every item that you wanted to get. But honestly, I do want to give a big shout out to the devs, because they have listened to all the feedback and made it twice as easy to get the items that you want. You can even get the crafting materials without going through any game, just by defeating certain enemies or doing missions. But honestly, the missions aren't really worth it, so it's better to just do the mini game instead. Just farm the code breakers and then do the mini game. But it's definitely not as bad as people make it seem. And yeah, this is another of those games that the devs actually do seem to listen. And coming from the finals, I guess I'm a bit spoiled, and I wasn't expecting to see that, especially from Nexon, as they don't have the best reputation. But I definitely feel like the devs are listening. Every patch notes that comes out, not only the patch notes are huge to begin with, but there's very often a comment from the game's director, from the design team, explaining why changing one thing one way, or explaining to us, the players, why they saw an issue with something and why they're changing it. Even with the most recent patch, they brought up that, oh yeah, we noticed that people are abusing this mechanic, and instead of just fixing the mechanic and leaving it at that, realize that they're abusing it for reasons, looking over the whole mechanic, and we're gonna rework it to make it more fun. better or optimal in a future patch. Now, we didn't get the change yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be pretty good going off their wording. Another really good thing that they changed actually this patch was that they added a setting where you can disable explosives or effects from other players, which sounds small, but it actually makes a big difference because there's a build specifically for Glay where she can spam rocket launchers on enemies, and it looks cool, but when you're clearing bosses, you cannot see what you're shooting at whatsoever because of all the smoke clouds and explosions from the grenade launcher. So by enabling this tiny setting, it's so much easier to see what you're shooting at, and you're no longer getting griefed by your teammates using an explosive. And to me, it really shows that the devs are paying attention and that they're either playing the game themselves or just watching streamers, because it became obvious if you watched the game and paid attention, but it's such a small thing that most developers won't think about it. And of course, I also want to mention something that I think is really cool, which is that the game is already coming out with a creator program off rip, and I just think that's really good as a content creator. I'm a bit biased, but it's really cool to see, especially one with a small kickback towards creators in the game's community. So, you know, if somebody is supporting the creator, like in Fortnite, when they purchase something in game, the creator get a little bit of that money as well. It's not a lot, it's just a few percentages, but that adds up with a larger community. And with a lot of developers being hesitant, it's very interesting to see a publisher who has a reputation of being greedy coming out with such a generous program as soon as the game comes out. And I actually did apply for this and I have been accepted. So basically, if you try the game out or if you're already playing it, you can go into the description, click the link, and then just sign into Nexon and click the support button. And then if you do buy something, I will get a kickback. And even if you don't, it helps me out. So feel free checking it out. But rest assured, I am not holding my punches for the second part of this video because of this creator program. I'm just mentioning it because it exists and I think it's really cool to have one. But let's talk about the bad. And the bad doesn't really start until you finish the story and you start getting into hard mode and start grinding for the things that you might actually want, be that a new weapon or a new character or whatever. It is very grindy. I mean, it is the nature of a looter shooter, so I can't hate on it too much, but it definitely does feel very grindy and almost like it doesn't respect your time, even more so when compared to your competitors, that being Warframe or Destiny. I haven't played those myself, but that's a common complaint that I've seen specifically about this game. And while I can't attest for the comparison, I can definitely feel that the grind is pretty crazy sometimes. There's certain items that I've been grinding for 6 hours or 8 hours straight, and once I get this one item, I need to plug it into a crafter, and crafting can take 4 hours or 6 hours, and then I need to grind another item, which will also take me 6 to 8 hours if I'm lucky, and then another one that might even take me 12 hours, and once I have all the parts, then I need to craft the weapon again that takes several hours. And it's just frustrating how much time you need to spend grinding for specific items, and if you don't get the items, it's not like, oh yeah, you just aim for the moon and if you miss, you'll hit the stars. You actually get basically nothing. So for every time you do go for the RNG that you want and you don't get it, it genuinely feels like you just wasted your time. And this could take up to 30 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe longer before you even get to roll on the item that you want. I will explain how this works a little bit down the line, but there's basically something called infiltration outposts where you need to first roll to get like a loot box, I guess we'll call it, that you might want, which has a pretty low drop rate. And then once you have the loot box, you need to plug it into something else and roll again to even see if you get the item that you want to begin with. It's RNG on RNG, and it's incredibly time consuming and sometimes very frustrating to deal with. Now, obviously, they have given us the problem and they're also selling us a solution. As I said, when you have all the items that you want, you're gonna have to wait 4 hours, 6 hours, 12, even up to 36 hours for something you might want. And much like in many mobile games, you can just pay money and skip the waiting time if you don't want to wait. And it's not like it's any cheap either. I mean, if I want to skip a research, I mean, I'm crafting this thing here. Let me just check this out. It'll cost me about 90 caliber to actually skip this craft. To put that in perspective, you can get 250 caliber for 5 euros. So that means you would pay about $2 or something just to skip this timer of 5 hours. If you want to skip a 36-hour timer, that is significantly more. There's also tons of other things that you can purchase in the shop. There is obviously a battle pass. You can buy a character for, let's say, $5 or so for 300 or even 900 caliber. You can buy Ultimate Descendants, which is a leveled up version of them, and we'll get to that later. The plot, for example, the Premium Ultimate Bunny bundle costs 5,000 caliber to actually unlock. You do get some bonus stuff that you would get in store otherwise, but that is still about $100 worth, a little less than that. And overall, it's pretty expensive. Now, purchasing these things, like you're paying for convenience, you're paying to skip the time. You can grind for most of these things in game, and in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to purchase it. You can pay for it if you would like to, but overall, I feel like it's a special type of person that is expected to actually shell out the money to buy this. I don't think the normal person is expected to shell out money to actually purchase these skips or purchase the skins or purchase the characters or legends. It's something that they put in the game to monetize it, and if you want to pay for it, great. If you don't want to pay for it, if anything, it kind of adds value if you really think about it. Like, okay, instead of paying for the money with my own hard-earned cash, I actually went through time to grinder. It took me 36 hours to get all the materials, and then it took me, I think it ended up taking me 90 hours to get all the materials, all the characters I needed, and then craft the ultimate bunny. So I could pay $100 or I could grind for 90 hours. But if this skin costs, let's say $10, then people definitely wouldn't grind for it because it wouldn't feel like it had some value. So adding the cost to the items kind of adds value. And this is probably a hot take and I'll stand by it. I'm not necessarily defending it too much, but I can see that there is a point to it from a game design perspective as well. But ultimately, I do wish that there were more things that you could only get from grinding, so it wouldn't feel like you could just open your wallet and get the item that you paid for. Well, everyone else has to grind and work hard for it. And what's annoying is most of these characters or items that you grind for are things that you get at the very end of the game. You should just focus on the story in the first half of the game until you reach level 100 or whatever and unlock hard mode. Most of the gameplay loop over the clicking bosses, which we will talk about later, is just outpost grinding. And I hate outpost grinding. Now, the devs have said they're going to tweak some things around it and lower some timers or whatever, but it is still to be outpost grinding. So let me tell you guys why I hate it, because this thing is just frustrating. So let me explain how outpost grinding works. Let's say I want to get an item. Let's say I want to upgrade my perforator hand cannon. If I want to get my perforator hand cannon, I need all of these materials, but let's say I want a perforated polymer stickum. This is the most rare one out of all of them. Then in order to get this, I need a amorphous material pattern 101. Now, to get an amorphous material 101, what I need to do is I need to go to the strategic outpost in White Knight Gulch. I need to play Sharon, another character that you can buy or grind for, and I need to do an infiltration where I run up and I hack these three things and then kill a boss at the very end. When I do this successfully, I have a 5 to 25% chance of actually getting this amorphous material pattern that I want. It's not very high. And whether I get it or not, as soon as I finish the strategic outpost, it goes on a cooldown. It goes on a 5-minute cooldown. So I cannot do it again for another 5 minutes. Now, what I can do is zone hop. I can just jump to another zone and jump back. And if I get lucky, I get put into another instance where it has reset, but it's still a timer that I need to wait for, which means I have to like tab down or go on TikTok or do something completely different than playing the game I actually do want to play. Or I have to do this annoying loop of jumping around in and out of the zone, sometimes several times in a row until I finally actually unlock the outpost so I can do it again. And again, it's a 5 to 25% chance of getting this loot box or amorphous material pattern. That's not even the item I want just yet. So once I have this thing, I have to actually bring it. In this very case, I need to bring it to a Abyssal Void Fusion Reactor. Some of these you have to open in boss fights, but this one specifically, and the crux of my complaint, you have to open with a Fusion Reactor. Now, the Fusion Reactor that you want to open here is the White Knight Gulch Observatory Reactor, okay? And in order to even open this reactor, you're gonna need 37 monomer shards and 8 organic void shards. What are these? Yeah, I didn't tell you about this part yet. In order to get these shards, you need to play something called a void mission fragment, which looks like this. There are 4 different types of void shards in the game, and these are basically locked behind the type of elemental your characters are. If you only have the default characters, you cannot do most of these. You have to actually grind for characters to be able to unlock them. In the case of this one fusion reactor we wanted to do, we need to do monomer shards. We need to go to a whole different place, all the way up in Fortress, and play Bunny, because this is the most optimal way to do it, and just grind these shards. We're gonna have to play this specific mission 2 to 3 times until we get enough monomer shards to do this. Then we also need to get organic shards, which we don't even get from this one, so we have to grind a completely different mission to get the organic shards. What I've been doing is I go to Vespers, Lepic, a whole different character, and we run this mission. Usually 1 time is enough because you don't need as many to unlock it, but it adds to this whole annoying part of the loop. And obviously this only goes for one run. You're gonna have to do this all over again if you wanna do more runs, which you're gonna have to do. Especially if you don't even have the shards that you want to unlock the item that you want. Like, let's say I'm re-rolling on this outpost. I've been trying to roll and get this one amorphous material loot box for the last few minutes or half an hour, and I'm just tired. I want to go and open the loot box. Then I go to the reactor and, oh, look at that. I don't have the void shard. I don't have the material to open this up. So then I need to go on a whole different side quest and grind just to get it. And what I hate the most about the void fragment missions, I think, is that you don't really get anything out of it. You're literally just grinding for the void shards. You don't really get any loot. You don't really get, I guess you get character and weapon experience, but it's not efficient. And overall, it just feels like a waste of time. But anyways, once I have the shards, we're back at the fusion reactor. We can finally crack this bad boy open. We're gonna have to fight a boss that is really unbalanced, mind you. Like, if you're this thing, good luck. They're very tanky. I'm pretty sure they're balanced for 4 people, so if you're soloing, it's gonna be rough. But finally defeat this thing. It opens a repurposed device. It is a repurposed device you can actually roll to open your loot box. And there's 5 different items that you can get at a 6% drop rate, 10%, 20, 32, and then the one I do want is also 32%. And I'm not gonna complain about drop rates because I don't think they're rigged, but it is RNG. So if I want to get this perforator thing, I have to go play an outpost at a 5 to 25% drop rate, and then I have to go get the void shards, and then I have to go to the reactor, defeat an annoying boss, and then roll again. So after all of this, despite me having the loot box, I might still not get the item that I want. And specifically, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to upgrade my weapon. So I need to do this grind specifically for this weapon 5 times. 1 to get the weapon, and then 4 more to upgrade it all the way that I want. And that's just one item. This applies to almost every single weapon in the game, almost every single Descendant or character in the game. Basically, all of the end game is just doing this gameplay loop, and it is mind-numbing. I don't think I would complain that much about grinding if it was just me fighting a lot of enemies in a typical grind. But seeing as I have to jump in and out of the zone or wait 5 minutes and then hop to one place to get one thing and then another to get another thing and then do RNG upon RNG upon RNG, it's a very frustrating gameplay loop, especially when 99% of your time in the end game will be spent on this specific loop. This is all I've been doing for several days now. I have had a lot of things to say about this specific part. But it's also worth mentioning that there are a lot of Descendants available in the game, so you can play the game however you want to. There's so many different ways that you can do it. But the problem is that there are way more Descendants than there are Descendant slots. You cannot actually get all the Descendants. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 different Descendants right now, but only 10 slots. So once you get 10 of them, you need to either dismiss them after you've grinded for them, or you could just purchase a slot for 50 caliber. It's not too much at the end of the day, but you do need to purchase more slots. So if you would want to get additional 9 slots, that would run you about $10. So again, they're creating a problem and selling the solution, which is a little bit annoying to put up with. It does feel a little bit disrespectful, I'm not gonna lie. And definitely when you get towards the end of the game, you will have to buy a slot if you want to keep grinding, or you just cannot keep grinding Descendants. But hopefully this is something that will change because it's ridiculous, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. The same goes for the preset slots. You only really get 7 different presets at the start. You could purchase more presets. However, you can buy up to 25 more presets. You can have different reactors, weapons, characters, or mods, or whatever it is you want, but you only get 7 off the rip. You also can get more setting slots for your weapons or your characters, where you can set different customizations, modules, and whatever you want. But again, you only have 3 different options for these, and then you could buy another one for a few dollars. But it's a little bit absurd that they have all of these things, and you'll get by with just 3 of them. If I'm gonna be honest, I only use 1 really, and then use presets for everything else. But it is a little bit annoying knowing that a lot of this is locked behind a paywall. As it is a looter shooter, I would have loved it if there was a way to get all of this for free, but at the moment there isn't a way to get this for free. There's also no trading in the game, so if you end up getting items that you already have, if you're getting the items you need to create a character or a weapon that you already have, you get duplicates. It just ends up going into your inventory and you can't actually do anything with it. But hopefully they will add trading soon, and then this part won't matter. Grappling is super fun. It is a bit clunky, especially with climbing. I keep getting caught on edges and just straight up falling off. There's also these weird missions where you jump between platforms and you have to pick up these floating orbs, and then you have to get a bunch of them and then you succeed in a mission. And this really showcases how awkward running and jumping is. You keep getting stuck on things or slipping off of them, or having your grapple just completely disconnect or even fling you off completely, at which point you just fail the mission. So overall, I feel like the climbing could use a lot of work. And ultimately, I do want to say that I kind of brushed on it before, but I do feel like the solo experience, as somebody who does prefer to play a lot of games as a solo player, is okay until you start running hard mode and hard bosses and even the hard void interceptions. There's some dungeons or bosses that are near impossible to play in private or solo mode, but not fully impossible, just very difficult. But there are several features, like you have to escort a bond from point A to point B, or you have to stand in a circle and capture it, that are significantly slower just because you're one person instead of 4. I don't know why it doesn't just capture faster when you're playing in private mode or solo, but it doesn't. So it will actually take you longer to do something. Even if you're clearing all the enemies faster as a solo player, it will take you longer to clear the entire dungeon because you're only one person instead of 4 standing in the circle. Then obviously as a solo player, you'll be solo queuing into the void interceptions or the big boss fights, and they don't do that good of a job explaining how the boss fights work. I've made one video so far and I'm more down the line where I plan to explain how the bosses work, but the randoms have no idea how the boss's own mechanics works. They don't seem to understand even how weak points work or most of the mechanics that goes into how a boss fight works. So you seem to hopefully be able to dodge the attacks and not stand in the fire, but even that's a bit of a stretch sometimes. I would say overall that the teammates are very unreliable and very frustrating. So if you're looking for a game to play as a solo queue player, it's doable, but very frustrating and infinitely faster in a full stack. I recommend doing that if nothing else. But wow, the negative ended up being a really long part of this video. I just wanted to make sure that we covered everything. We probably did miss a few things, but these are the things that are really on my mind. But as a final conclusion, I'd say that overall, it is a pretty good game, especially around the start of the game. But as you become more hooked, the grinds and the wait times between the content becomes more tedious and longer, and it feels like you're being slow dripped the enjoyment behind a huge wait time or very long grind. It is very rewarding once you get what you want. So I mean, as far as a looter shooter goes, it does get that part right, but man, it was a lot more fun and less of a chore 150 hours ago. I don't see this as the type of game that I would personally main and make my whole channel about, and I think I'm getting close to finishing it. I mean, I've unlocked almost everything I need, but we'll just have to wait to see. But I am probably planning to wrap up the preseason for myself and then wait for season 1 to drop with more content before I get back into it. But that's after hundreds and hundreds of hours, so it's safe to say I got my enjoyment out of it. But anyways, that was my quick review of the first Descendant. I hope you guys enjoyed this style of video. Since we're trying to do more variety and trying out more games, especially in the shooter genre, I figured we should probably also talk about the games, maybe as a bit of a review, so you guys can decide whether it's worth getting into it yourself or not. But let me know if you guys want to see more content like that. If you do, hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.